Hello and welcome to the ProfitRx, the newest episode today with Josh Fertel. Josh, how are you?
I am fine, sir. I'm very excited to be speaking with you today. You're the master.
Well,
Great.
it seems like I'm just a facilitator and you are the master because the ProfitRx show is right now, at this moment, one, two, three, four, five, 6 countries on the chart,
Oh,
medicine categories. Netherlands 14, Germany 29, United States 31, Switzerland 38, Canada 63, South Africa 78. So, well, it seems like you're the subject matter expert and people want to hear you out.
well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the work you're doing too to make this happen. Thank you.
All right, Josh, today's topic is smart investments, when to spend big, when to walk away, and especially in terms of all the medical practices. And I have worked with medical practices for long. So my first question is, there's something called shiny object syndrome,
Yes,
and doctors are not, even though they solve diseases, but they're not able to keep themselves away from this. So the question is, how can provider recognize when they are falling into this shiny object syndrome instead of making smart investments?
that it's funny you asked that because I've had that come up a couple times this past week, and I have this whole thought process about that. The salespeople that come in with their devices and they bring in a nice lunch, Chick-fil-A or Olive Garden, things like that, and then they start, promoting their item. And as a provider, I get it, and I kind of equate it to the car business where I spent my whole life. You're getting your sales pitch, and here's the nicest, newest thing, and you need to have this, and your friends need to see it. But then really what does it come down to is, do I really need this thing? And what does the math work? But before you even do that, what's the purpose of getting it, right? Um, a doctor, their product is healthcare, right? Is making sure everybody feels great, living their best life, right? My product is to get doctors paid. Your product is to build your media company, right? We all have something that we have to do. So for me to do my job correctly, what I want to do is I want to have the best product. That to me is then going to make me successful. So when I have this machine put in front of me, this, equipment, this drug, it's like, is this drug going to make my patients better? That's got to be the first question, right? Is this drug going to cure cancer? Is this drug going to cure dementia? Not, oh, here's a drug. I wonder how much I can make on it, right? That's not the way to think about it. So, if you have the mindset of, is this going to work and make my patients better? I will reap the rewards if it does. And like I said, I had this week. There's a big shiny machine called practice called TMS, right? Transcranial magnetic stimulation, and it works, right? It's great. It cures depression, PTSD. It works in the psychology realm. It's an expensive machine, and we started working before they got started with a practice that was the business they were going to be in. They bought the machine, they had it all set up, they had the doctor, they had the equipment, fancy office, everything like that. And the math did not end up working out. But that was their thing. We are going to be, they hired the doctor. They were not medical people, but they want to be in this business, this TMS business. Fast forward this week, I spoke with another client that's in, behavioral health. And they said, well, we do TMS. And I was like, I wanted to get sing. I said, tell me how the TMS worked for you. And he says, it's okay, right? It depends on the machine because there's a cost to it. And my first thought was to ask him, well, how was the patient response? But I thought, maybe that was the wrong question to ask, and he might be offended that I was asking him that question. But the first thing he thought of was the math behind it. So you get stuck in these machines, stuck in these glamorous things that are supposedly going to make you rich. But, the first thing I want you to think of is, how can I make my patients healthier? and what's the response there. And it doesn't always take a shiny new object to do that. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my whole thought process behind it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very valid point. Like the main service for them is patient care.
Right.
So let's start there and then make the math work, not
Then
start
make the
with,
math work. Right.
you
You know,
yeah,
what do I have in my arsenal that's going to improve patient care? Right. Because if I do that, my practice is going to grow. Word of mouth is going to happen. People are going to send their families to me. And my practice is going to grow. Not how much am I going to make off of this machine that's costing me an arm and a leg, but well, I'm not even going to get into all the things that it costs to have a machine like that.
yeah. Um, let's get practical, right? So if a provider is thinking about making a big purchase, right? What are the two, three questions they need to ask before signing that check?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to go back to the car business, which I know is better than anything else, right? You're going to go out and you're going to buy a car. Okay, here it is. I made my deal, shook hands. Now I have to make my payments. What else goes into it, right? Maintenance. Okay, you have this nice hundreds of thousands of dollars machine. What happens if something goes wrong with it, right? We have to think about that. Who is going to be providing the service? Is it the provider themselves? Well, then, okay, well, I'm taking my time away from treating my other patients to do this. Is that going to work, right? Does that math make sense? Do I have to hire additional staff now to handle this machine? There's another expense. Training, right? That we have to train these people to do that. There's probably another expense, or at least time wise, an expense. So it's all these little things, and technology itself. What's shiny right now is not going to be shiny 2, 3 years from now, the way things move, right? They'll have a whole new thing. What do I do? Did I lease it? Did I buy it? Am I stuck with this machine now? Can I upgrade? So many things when you're thinking about such a big capital outlay, that you have to work on. And then, of course, what am I going to get reimbursed from insurance companies, which is a whole nother subject. Am I going to get reimbursed for every claim that I do? I have to have somebody make sure I have pre-authorizations. More time is being taken care of. So there's a lot to think about. You really got to sit down and do your homework before you make that kind of investment.
And how about like that's like the part of people looking at cost and stuff. But I also feel like it's also beyond that utilization, right? Like once you start actually using it, and then who knows, right? Like one is the cost of
Right.
cost of usage. Like are you going to have people on hourly basis sometimes using those because you don't have tech in house, and
Right.
then extra expense, right? And then also I see a lot of time is like there's maintenance part that's forgotten because a lot of the way world works is it's all volume based on software side. Med device wise, you go about this volume, your bill doubles.
Yes. Yes.
So
And
it's
and who in my patient pool, right, is going to be able to utilize this service, or do I have to go out and market for patients that I can do? There's so many variables and so many things that you really have to dig down and really think about it before you do that. But the most important thing is, what's the outcome going to be? Is this really going to make a difference to my practice? And then
yeah,
work backwards from there.
yeah. With this intent though, I feel like I meet with providers and they also come with like this set of mind, like, yeah, yes, I want to treat patients. So let me just treat a lot more patient.
Right.
So yeah, I serve the patient, but then also be profitable. But this is not necessarily true. Right?
No, no, you're right.
It's like, you know, you increase the patient volume doesn't mean it always leads to revenue. So why is this often not true? And how should they really be thinking about scaling? I guess this is a scale question.
I think if you're scaling any business, you have to make sure that you have your foundation set, right? No matter what you're building, you have to have your foundation set. So before you start looking for more patients or more office space or more staff, let's make sure we're capitalizing on everything that we're doing. Make sure we're doing everything correctly. So, you know, to be frank, it all starts with your billing and your coding, right? If you collect insurance, if you're not a cash pay provider and you have to rely on insurance companies, you need to concentrate on that. Are you coding correctly? Are you undercoding? Are you over coding? Are you providing all the services that you can to that one patient that's in front of you? Taking full advantage of what it costs you to have that patient in your office. You have to start there before you do anything else, because if you can pile garbage on top of garbage on top of garbage, so to speak, and you're doing more work and spending more hours, and the return is not going to be as great as if you just really just hone in on what it is that you're doing now with this one patient in front of you, and how can you maximize that. So again, before you go to expand or hire another provider so you can handle more patients, let's make sure that we're capitalizing on what we have first, because there's no cost to that. It doesn't cost anything to really just have a sit down and a conversation on what's going on with that patient that you have now. That's the way I look at it.
What What's your take on or guidance on the mix of patient, right? Like, of course, you can see patient, but then, it's a complex world of billing. We have X number of different insurances. And so how, I guess more of a question to you rather than like when you work with your clients, do you also provide guidance on, looking at the practices and the specialty and then based on your experience that, these are the insurances you should accept in this area because these provide a better coverage for patient, but also good on the billing and the reimbursement side. How do you navigate that? Do you do anything there?
You know, I'm not a. There are providers out there that have stopped their contracts with a number of payers because of the reimbursements. I think it really depends on where you are in your career, right? If you are just starting out, you need to build your patient, pool. You need to get as many patients as you can, and therefore you probably want to accept every insurance that you can get your hands on until you're at that level where you're maxed out on your time, you're maxed out on your space, and at that point you can start really thinking about, well, this doesn't make sense to do this because they only pay this for this service. This company only pays this for this service. This company takes forever to pay. This company's always asking for notes and delaying payments, and then you trim the fat. So I think it really depends on where you are in your career as to whether you want to do that. Perhaps you have patients that you don't want to use their insurance anymore, but they've been patients for so long that they don't mind paying, X amount of dollars in cash to stay with you. You're not going to get that right out of the gate. You need to really build that rapport with them and that trust with them. In the beginning, if I was just starting out, I would try to get my hands on every insurance that I could, which is not easy. But I would, anything that I can accept, I would accept, just so I can increase my patient base. Because that's your audience. That's who you sell to, and so that you want that to be as wide as possible.
That's a unexpected answer from you because even though you are saying, yeah, provider accepted, that's going to help you get all the patient, but then it becomes a billing headache for you to deal with all those things.
Right, I get that, but that's why I like this business. Um, I don't think that AI is taking over the billing business because it's so easy. It's always going to take human interaction, and I like solving the problems. So if this, we have an ambulance company that we bill for, and one payer, which I'm not going to say the name, doesn't pay. Like we have to they have this trick that we figured out. It took us a couple of tries to finally get them to pay, but they would deny everything. And we said, no, something's wrong here with the way they're doing it. They're looking for some little comma to be put in one extra place before they pay. So we like the challenge, of figuring out, putting this puzzle together. Because once you figure it out, it's easy, right? Once you have it done, it's easy. But, generally, if you're being diligent on the billing side and following up on the things that aren't paid, then they're going to get paid. Unless there's some weird circumstance, they're going to get paid.
Well, I like this for your customers, and because it's like you're basically kind of giving your customers like, hey, don't worry, get as many patients of all insurances in. Let us take care of the other thing, which is kind of like, it's a good thing to have from a practice point of view. You want a billing department that can be confident and be like, we'll get the money, right?
Yeah,
Let's
I
take.
mean, I would never think, and I would hope there's nobody in my industry that would ever say, "Listen, don't get that insurance because they're a pain in the butt to deal with." You know, my gosh, I hope people don't say that. I imagine maybe some do, but or don't use this EHR because I can't really deal with it. My job is to make it easy for the provider. You go take care of your patients and go take care of as many as you can, and you make as much as you can on each one. I'll take care of the grunt work. My team will take care of the grunt work. You go do as much as you can, and we're gonna help you.
Well, more providers who are listening to this episode. I mean, this is the man. You should work with a company like this. This is what you want. Not to worry about all these things. Actually, have full access, get the most wider spread, give most care to the patient. I really like that. Um, okay, so Josh, we touched upon a little bit about the medical device example, right? And so I had a doctor I knew, and he was also spending $100,000 in piece of this medical equipment. Okay, and what are the most common reasons they do it? Like, is it like when it makes sense? Like, is there a path to that, and how often that? Like what's the real financial analysis that people do behind the scene? Can you give us those insights a little bit?
To get into the mindset of why somebody does that, I don't know that I'm equipped to do such a thing. If you have a good salesperson telling you, oh, this is going to change everything and you are going to make $1 zillion by using this thing, I suppose that people are going to say yes. Some people are going to say yes. They're going to. Um, I don't know if it's the way I was brought up. I don't know if it's the way I've gone through all my years of life, but I want to find something that I don't have to have as much outlay to try to get the result. And it goes back right to the beginning. Is this machine gonna make all of my patients better, and that I never have to see them again? If that's the answer, then yes, I get it. But if you're being pitched on saying, if you do this and this is going to help and you're going to make X amount of dollars because here's the reimbursement on it, and that's your thinking, there's definitely better ways to do it. There's definitely better ways to do it. So it really comes down to mindset. If you give this to your patient, they will never have Alzheimer's ever. Okay, yeah, bring it on. That's great. We definitely want to do that. But if it's not that, if it's not something that just is going to make the patient experience and patient's health better, then it's just a math problem, right? How much am I going to make? If that's what your train of thought is, then before you invest all this money into it, what are the other options? If it's really just about making money, what else can be done? And there's so many opportunities in the medical field to do that without the big outlay. And outsourcing it is even the better way to go because you have no downside, right? Somebody else is putting in the downside for things that can be done. And we talked about chronic care management. We talked about allergy testing. We talked about pulmonary testing. We talked about um, we've talked about scans. These are all things you can outsource and benefit from. And they do it. Chronic care management is like the greatest thing ever invented because it actually does make patients healthier. It really does. And if it's done correctly, it, Medicare knows that everybody benefits. So that's the kind of thing I would think about stuff like that before I spent money on a machine. I don't know. It's kind of like a commercial, but
No, no, fair. Uh, what like do you bump into a lot of, like, there's like always this fear of missing out, FOMO, and peer pressure. You see another friend of you in medical community, he bought the device, he's putting a video on Instagram. The other doctor's like, I saw that he's using this. So how do you feel about that? Then you run into those, they ask you, hey, I'm gonna buy this machine.
Yeah, you know, I've been in offices of my clients just visiting, and lunch comes, and there you go, the device person's there with their peddling their wares, so to speak, and I sit and I listen, I keep my mouth shut, and then you can kind of see, like, the doctor's eyes that turn into dollar signs and things like that, and then the patient's leaving. I was like, really, do you really need that, right? Do it, you know, and then it kind of brings them back to reality. I don't even have to say anything, but yes, they you get excited because you have professional salespeople who are trained to do this, and they get excited and they think this is going to be a life changing thing. It's like, do you really think it's going to work? Let's sit here and talk about it. And I bring up again the TMS machine because that's the thing that I've encountered a couple times now, and that is a very expensive piece of machinery, and you really have to have all your ducks in a row if you're going to get into that business. Established clientele that it's going to benefit,
Yeah.
and know what your reimbursements are going to be, and know how to use it.
Yeah, I have a physician I know, and he's actually not no insurance person, and but I know in his philosophy of work it makes sense because he's very clear, he's holistic,
Right.
and his thing is very clear. Like it's like he is really worked towards mental health and the spiritual piece along with medicine. That's how he built his framework around it. So when he bought this, I mean, it clearly made sense to me. I was like, oh yeah, this is the missing piece in my mind. Now my patients recover and they get to this point. The next point after this is now optimization of brain health, and that's where we get into this direction, right? So when he came with that reasoning, I was like, yeah, wow, I mean, this is great, like how you're explaining. And no surprise, I saw him like on Instagram with one famous athlete doing that. I'm like, wow, okay. So, but the point is, once you come with that, if you have that philosophy in your practice, and that is how you're going to treat it, then you're not looking at machine as a piece of, yeah, let me just kind of add this as a dollar dollar machine that will increase something, but more of a practice of how this will enhance my patient's care, right? And that's a very different thing.
To be the first thought, even as I said, I was speaking to this gentleman who does it now, and the first thing he said was okay. And when I asked him how's it going, and his first answer was not, oh yeah, my patients are really doing great on it. That wasn't the first thing he said. The first thing he thought of was the business side. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Um, okay. This is, I think the matter is, again, care first, patient care first, and
Correct.
then go from there.
Yes.
Um, all right. So on the flip side, let's talk about smart investments, right? Like what's one area where you consistently see providers like underinvesting and you wish like they should do more because that would help boost their profitability. What's your take on that?
It's got to be technology. It's got to be the answer. Um, and even as something as simple as your EHR, when you're first starting out in practice, I get it. You don't want to spend the money for one of the bigger ones. You want to get in as cheaply as possible. But when you're spending $50 a month on an EHR, you're getting a $50 EHR. And there's a reason why it's like that. That somebody took a coding class on YouTube and came up with an EHR. That's what some of these are like. I mean, you're laughing, but it is. Am I getting good reporting? Am I getting good, reporting? Really? Let's talk about that. What's outstanding? Am I coding? Does it doing the codes for me? Does it have AI capability? You have to spend some money on an EHR. Now, it doesn't have to be $1,000 a month, but it cannot be $50, $100 a month for some of the ones that are out there now. They're hard to use, um, and you don't get out of it, and you don't get enough out of it. And then what's going to happen is you're going to grow, your practice is going to grow, and you're going to outgrow that EHR. And I could probably name like 20 off the bat that we use them, we hate using them, and we try to talk our providers out of them. So you need a good EHR. That's the first thing. You need a good they all have or are starting to get AI capability, right? So you're able to look your patient in the face. You don't have to turn your back to look at the computer. You can look at them in the face. You can dictate what you want, and it's going to come out and it's going to put the codes on it. They have that, right? What a great patient experience that is, where you're not turning your back to start typing and making notes and things like that. That you're looking at them directly. Just think about the interaction there. And the EHRs, some of them are getting it. It's going to be standard probably very soon, but you're not going to get it on a $50 EHR plan. So avoid that. I get it. You want to not spend the money when you're first starting out, but it is an investment that you have to make. You want to have a good clearinghouse. Last year there was a big problem with clearinghouses that got hacked. There's two or three really good ones, so you want to make sure your EHR does work with those. And not that anybody can get hacked, but they seem to be doing a pretty good job of not getting hacked. So if you're going to invest, that's where you start. And second, you want to invest in training, right? The people that you have. Um, and it doesn't have to be anything like a class that you really, have to spend tons of money on, but just to go to, let them send them to a conference where they can learn about some new techniques, or take a class online on how to deal with people, anything like that. Front desk training, if there was such a thing. Maybe I'll invent that. But invest in the people that you have. Again, you're building the foundation to expand. So you're not building a house of cards, right? You're building a house of bricks. It's got to start with the foundation. So those are very simple, not very costly things that need to be done. Not even want to do, that need to be done right from the beginning. Make sure you have the right personnel, but obviously technology is the biggest thing.
If outside of technology, I guess, if somebody has $50,000, where should they put in the practice? Where would you tell them, or how would you even like? What's the process? Like, how do you like think about it? Like, I'm a practice. I have $50,000, and I'm thinking, where should I invest this time so I get the biggest return outside of tech?
Technology. Oh, that's a tough question. Um, you know, well, so I'm going to take training the staff out of it also. Okay. So we just already talked about those things. How inviting is your office, right? What kind of impression does it make when somebody walks into your office? Can you spend a little money on some flowers and, nice seating and, television that has, HD TV on it, and how inviting is your office is in your waiting room as people are waiting? How is your interface with patients when you're sending them bills, right? When you're sending them their notices, and their statements for deductibles and things like that. How is that interface? Is it done by, are you doing it by mail? Are you doing it, by a pay per click on the credit card? So that's something really maybe to invest in. That makes it easy for everybody. It costs what, $1 and change now to send a statement out. If you have somebody that owes you $5, it's not even worth sending it. But if you can send them a text real quick, those are basically free. So add up those $5 is, it's going to add up. So, the interaction with patient, really, I guess both things that I said are really just making the patient experience a lot better. I would do that. And the more comfortable they are, certainly, then they're going to refer their friends, how nice your staff is, how well dressed, maybe they have uniforms. These are very little things. I probably couldn't even spend $50,000 if I wanted to, just to make the patient experience better. The checkout, make sure it's all friendly and you have everything, and you have a good phone system. You answer the phone when patients call, or you call them back if you're busy. Invest in the patient experience. Maybe outsource a phone room if you need to.
It's I have had this thought in last months or so a lot. Actually, I bumped into something. What I was thinking is like, at this moment of time, patience, just like expectation, is like it's table stakes at that point that you want to have the patient experience. And this is like not just tech, other pieces, everything involved, right? Like in person, how you view it, how you get your bills, how you pay them, do you have to call them back, all that stuff included, right? And there is certainly, I think, a major point that you pointed out. I have thought to that point that I think we are going to see the rise of, not to say a new job title, but almost like a person practices will hire to like, hey, just look at our patient journey and help us improve
Right.
patient experience, right? And that's going to be key because I'm reading more and more. Literally, I was looking at this clip from some other podcast, and this guy, he from a patient side, he literally named this practice in Brooklyn, a friend of mine. And I was like, really? And then I went in and checked and the practice, and immediately I'm seeing the website. I'm already can make it because whole the way they are showing it, even in pictures they're showing on the website, like this is what the experience look like when you come in and all that. And that was and that made me like think like, wow, so really like outside of everything you do, this is such a primary part of like growing the practice now because this gives you that thing. And then I started to think like, are there business success story? And then it came to my mind like, yeah, One Medical, which was that experiment that got acquired, the main thing they did well was that experience thing, necessarily number one. And that's how they got acquired now. They were not necessarily something different on the treatment side. So, so I really think that you are nailing this, that this is like almost like before you spend money everywhere else, just like make sure your patient journey, go through that and that experience. Let's just get to the at par above par level, and that's going to create retention and loyalty and word of mouth
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, and I didn't mention it. I'm glad you did. Is the website. Have a nice website. It doesn't have to be the greatest, but have a nice. Have pictures of yourself. Um, I have a friend who I network with who is a headshot photographer, and he told me a story once how one doctor that he took a headshot for, his practice changed just because of the headshot. And he said people saw him and they said, "This is a guy I can trust," just from the headshot. And his practice changed because of that. So you have to have a nice interactive website with testimonials and it's referral references, things like that. That's important, and that's not a costly thing either. And keep that maintained.
And you so providers who are considering new services, like, and you mentioned few of those, allergy testing, weight management, med spa services, in what's like a simple formula or framework they can use to calculate whether it's worth the investment, considering that it is going to be beneficial to their patient.
I think the first thing you got to think of is to find yourself a good company that you can outsource those programs to. Why is that? You're not taking any time, right? You have no capital investment, right? Somebody else is paying the labor, somebody else is paying for the materials, somebody else is driving around to do the scans. Some you know, all you do is you benefit, right? Because anything that you do, any service you do, no matter how small it is going to take time and it's going to take some kind of investment. If you can take that out of the equation and go ahead and see your 10, 12, 15 patients that day without interruption, and you have this second income stream for work that you're not doing, somebody else is doing for you, even if you're splitting it somehow, it's still, right down the bottom line. If you think about it, you've been practicing for a couple of years, you're paying all your bills, and if all of a sudden you have all this extra money coming in, that's going right into your pocket, right? All your bills have already been paid. This is additional. So anything that you're thinking about doing, whatever kind of inkling is, I am sure that there is a company out there that can do it for you as an outsource. I mean, that's really changed my business when I learned how to do chronic care and I had never heard of it before. And I did the research and I found a good, fair way to do it where it didn't even hurt their cash flow, nothing. It was all just plain profit to my client. And he makes 80, $100,000 a year in his pocket just doing it, and he doesn't lift a finger. He just lets his patients know that we're going to be taking care of them in between appointments. So I would start there. If you're a family medicine, I would start with chronic care. And if you have space, if you have an office, you could bring in somebody that does allergy. What about a lab? You can find a lab company to come in and rent space from you. And this way you're not sending people down to Quest and things like that. You can do it right there. Think about that. Just saving time. If you have an older population, they're not running around town, and just rent the space. There you go. A couple $1,000s a month. There's so many ways to do it without the outlay. but we don't want to outlay and we don't want to waste time because time can be spent with patients.
No, I like this. Would you think the same principle apply also on equipment side? Like, can you like, would you say like lease first or buy first, or is like that's completely different evaluation?
I think you have to lease. Again, technology changes every day, right? What's state of the art now is not going to be state of the art tomorrow. So, I'm not an accountant. I wouldn't say to you do it this way, depreciation, no, that whole thing. That's not what I do. But you're gonna want to have to keep up. You're gonna want to keep up upgrading because things change too quickly nowadays, right? Things change too quickly, and if you want to have the best thing around, you can't have a 5-year-old machine.
And how does it work on the leasing side though? Like, is it like just like a similar model, but just like it just de-risk your investment? That's kind of the main motive behind that, or is it just like something else? Are there other benefits? I don't know, on billing side.
As far as billing, no. As far as billing, it's the insurance company, the payers, they don't care how you paid for the equipment. They don't care if you wrote a check for it. That doesn't matter. Really, it comes down to what your accountant says is the best way to do it. And again, I don't have an accounting degree, but you know. To me, like I said, it's just like cars. A 3-year-old car is nowhere near a 2022 car is nowhere near a 2025 car nowadays. Things just change that quickly. And so, that's why you lease, right? So you can upgrade at the end of the X amount of years.
Yeah. Okay. And cutting down on expenses, right? Like what's one thing you would say like every practice should be look this specific thing only with the view of cutting because there are certain things you just want to keep that lens on. That's it. What's that thing?
The two the two biggest expenses, right, that everybody has is your labor and your office. Okay, so let's see what's there. Now, I'm not saying we need to fire this person because we don't need them, but are we getting the most out of this person? Is there something else that they can be doing during the course of the day? How much downtime do they have? And if we feel like we can't fill it, maybe they should be part time, or maybe we don't need that extra person. So certainly, labor is the most expensive thing. That's the first thing you got to look at. Second, are we utilizing every inch of our office? Right? Do we have an office? Do we have an exam room that nobody goes in? Okay, well, what are we going to do? We need to find a reason for that exam room. And again, can we put an allergy in there? Can we put a lab in there? Can we put somebody in there? Can we bring in a med spa? Can we bring in a massage therapist? Can we bring in a relaxing chair, something like that to use that to generate some income. So every inch of an office needs to generate income outside of the controller's office. How do we do that? Let's look around and see what kind of extra space there's. So those are the first two things you got to do. Let's look for the leakage there. What can we get? How do we get the most out of those two things? And then really you can dial down, what percentage am I paying on my credit cards? How much am I paying for my vendors? Is it time to renegotiate the my contracts? You can go on endlessly as to where you can try to think from your cable bill to the phone bill. What kind of phone system do we have? Because phones now are cheap if you have the right system. Uh, how are we doing our telehealth? What are we paying for our EH? So many things. Are we utilizing everything to its maximum too? Oh, I know, like we go back to EHR. EHRs can do a million things. Are you using those million things? Is it making your life easier by doing them, or you just don't know how to do it? You don't know what you don't know about it, and can that be doing something that'll make your life easier and free up time? There's a lot of ways. You got to start with personnel. You got to start with office, and then from there, just you can look at every bill you get and see if there's some room there.
I have a client of mine who's building a new practice, and I'm kind of learning through him the process of what all things he's adding and all that stuff. One of the troubles I had was like, yeah, he wants to buy this not so expensive EHR, but then he also doesn't know what it all comes with, and then he doesn't know to use it at all. Like, I mean, I get it, he's the provider, he probably won't have that much acumen on the tech side to do all that stuff. But then I'm like, do every practice need that, I don't know, that person who's like the person who navigate and work and make sure all features? How do you navigate when once you run into a client like that? Like it's hard. Like I don't know. I feel like, oh, I would want to help him, but this is not my job, and this will take away. And he would still need someone every day for this. So I can't provide that everyday support, and he doesn't want to spend money on getting that. And he's early, so I don't know. It's like a hard balance.
I have no issue having a conversation with somebody and lending whatever kind of knowledge I have to them. You know, it doesn't have to benefit me. I'm a big karma believer. It'll come back. If somebody says to me, "What do you think about this?" I was like, "Do this." If we do business together, great. If we don't, I had that scenario a week or so ago. A family provider, and there were some codes that he should have been doing every time that he wasn't doing. And I was like, "Listen, whether we do business or not, I want you to start doing this, this, and this." Fine, we left. Of course, they called me 2 weeks later and said, "Okay, we're ready to go." But it doesn't hurt me, right? It doesn't hurt me to say, why don't you take a look at this? Or here are three EHRs which I want you to go take a look at, and pick which one you think is the best. And also the one thing with EHRs is the training has really gotten a little tough with them. They give you, okay, you have this amount of time for training, and after that it's going to cost you. I've seen that. So you want to find somebody that's used it for a while, perhaps a colleague that can tell you, okay, this is something that I discovered, that kind of thing. But sharing information is, there's no secret. I don't have any secrets that nobody else knows, so I don't mind sharing it. It comes back.
Great. This has been great. But before we end today's episode, one last question.
Yeah.
If any provider is listening to this episode today and they're feeling overwhelmed with their finances and unsure of their next investment, what's one action or step they should take that will give them this week clarity on their the financial clarity? What should they do? Like one thing or maybe even two things, whatever you prefer, that
Get
they should do.
another set of eyes on it, right? Just get somebody outside, somebody you trust, somebody that's doing this. If you want to call me, call me. But just get an outside, look at it. Somebody that, you know, is not necessarily even in the medical field, maybe to start, just a business person, just to take a look and just get an idea and have a conversation. And I don't know that there's like, you should get an answer in 2 minutes or anything like that. But another set of eyes. I do it in my practice. I have my guy, in my business. I have my guys who know more than I do. I was like, take a look at this. What do you think? Right? It's always good to have a separate set of eyes that's outside of the organization, just to see. You never know what somebody's going to see, and you have somebody come in looking at it with a different lens, so to speak. They're gonna find something that could be an improvement. Even if it's a tiny change, it adds up. Just find yourself a business partner or a mentor kind of thing, and let them take a look.
All right. And Josh, if one of the providers who's listening who wanted to reach out to you, can you be their eyes and get them that insight?
Love having those conversations. You know, great companies solve problems, right? I'm trying to be a great company. So if there's a problem I can solve, I love the challenge. That's probably the best
I
way.
love it. I love it. Thank you. Thanks for your time today. Thanks for sharing all the insight again. Once again, this has been another great episode filled with so many important tidbits of
Thank you.
make really the practice or medical practice profitable. So thanks for sharing it.
I appreciate it. Thanks again. I love doing it.